Florence, that was absolutely marvelous. I had no idea what you were going to say, but my introduction lined up wonderfully with what you did say. And that certainly brings back memories when you referred to the reunion at my father's farm. And it was at that reunion that I learned what a compassionate man my father was. For he gave me a small white dish, and he told me to go into the orchards and pick cherries. And I thought, what in the world is this all about? And he knew that his mother, my grandmother, liked cherries, and he wanted her to have what she wanted. And I learned something about my father that day. The next old guard is my Aunt Mary Robinson of Denver. Mary, I presume you are, there you are. Mary has a well-deserved reputation for being one of the most accomplished talkers of the world. Mary, I'm sure you will rise to the occasion today. There's nothing left for you to say, Mary.
And I asked my John what I should do. And he looked over the crowd and said, my gosh, Mom, you're sure up against it. I don't know what you're going to do. Because he said all those people will tell all the dirty stories that was ever in the family. But he said, you can always tell the John Delaney story. Now, do you want to hear the John Delaney story? John Delaney was an Irishman from Ireland that came over here. And at that time they called the Irish that came here greenhorns. Well, John wasn't really a greenhorn, but he was a very poor farmer. And he married Bridget Lyons, which he was the first cousin of our father. And they had 7 daughters. And the way he was a successful farmer was, he had all the relatives farm for him. That's kind of a Lyons trick. Anyway, at that time, and a few people who have lived in South Dakota know there isn't anything colder than south wind in February. And that was the day that John Delaney decided to take a load of grain to town to Wagner. Now, Wagner is an Indian reservation, and there was no liquor at that time. But John liked freezing it. And by the time he got to town, he was so cold, and he thought, oh, to heck with the law. I'll go to the drugstore and see if I can talk him into a little nip. And our druggist was a short man that wore heavy lens glasses. And when he talked, he raised his head and peeked through the glasses. He looked at Mr. Delaney and he said, Mr. Delaney, I wouldn't give Jesus Christ a drink if he came here. And Delaney shook his head and said, by the laws, if he came to me house and asked for a drink and I had it, I'd give it to him. But he said, you know, I've heard so much about that poor man, how they treated him, they beat him, and they even crucified him. But nobody ever said he was a drinking man. Now, John thinks that. This gentleman here mentioned confession. I could, with this mannish voice I have, I really throw the priest when I get girl sins. They peek out and really see. I really didn't have anything much to tell. My brother Bob and I were really the pals. But he told his family the oddest thing. He told them that St. Patrick was a Democrat. They believed him. Come election day, they'd all take off and go to the polls and wait to vote. Now they're married and tarried and all that, and they said, wasn't it queer they never found out what precinct that dear snake voted. And speaking of my mother, she was one of those many mothers that made, remember boys, South Dakota and North Dakota and all the Dakotas and all the states, United States, what it is today. They worked hard and they prayed hard and they laughed hard. And she was in our community one that would make speeches if anyone asked. And she had what she called, whenever she'd find anything interesting, she would cut it out. And she put it in what she called her clip box. And there was a lot of interesting things, politics and jokes, and we still have some clips. And I brought a clip that I thought that she might have used if she was here today. And you people asked her for something to take home. And this is the clip. Forget me not. When to the flowers so beautiful the Father gave a name, there came a little blue-eyed one, all timid and kind, and standing at the faithful Father's feet, and gazing at his face, he said with love and timid voice, and yet with gentle grace, Dear Lord, the name thou givest me, thou hast forgot. And the Father kindly looked at him and said, Forget me not. God bless you all, and when you come back next time, remember your new name, Forget me not.
Thank you, Mary. President Reagan is known as the great communicator. Next to my mother, Mary Donahoe Lyons of Yankton, he's an amateur. If you could turn the ink loose that she has used to communicate with her children over the years into the nearby Missouri River, I'm sure it would start a flood all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Now, Mary did not start out as a Lyons, but she became one at about the third point of her life. So she has spent, I think, about 2/3 of her life as a Lyons and 1/3 as a Donahoe. And she has truly become a Lyons, and I think she is qualified to speak to us today. So Mary, if you would come up here.
East of Yankton. The storm seemed to like us, and he kept hanging around until we had 5 sons. Then he left for a little while, and he came back. You know what? He brought a little girl, but she had another little boy tag along with her. And they're here. So that made 18 feet on the table all the time, and a whole lot more some of the time. The years were busy and fulfilling. One by one, the families began to leave, and there were 2 of us left. Again, it's the way we started out. Then in 1960, June, we were took his toll, and I was left alone. I now live in an apartment with my cat, Toby. Pat and Pearl moved down to the farm, but the Starks just couldn't stay away. And he stayed until he brought them 6 daughters. Now, I'm not sure if they're all here, but if they aren't, they will be. The next son, Frank, whom you know, and wife Rita, live in Rock Island and have a son and daughter in Dale here. Jean lives in Lexington, Kentucky, and is still looking. Jack and wife Margaret live in Yankton and have 4 sons. Tom and wife Marcia live in San Antonio and have a son and a daughter. Bob and wife Nonna live in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Okay. Susan and Helen live in Omaha and have a daughter. Well, Florence told you about the first reunion at their place. At that time, I didn't know very many of the kin, and I was a bit nervous about meeting them. So I asked Bill what I should wear. I'm not going to say exactly what he said because it might not be appropriate, but he said to wear the best I had. Well, I must have made a good impression because at least they accepted me. And then as Florence said, the next one was at our place. This continued until one by one they left us and it petered out. I hope the young ones will continue to take over now. And thanks for coming today. Before I close, I would like to tell a story. This was told by Archbishop at a meeting. This here old man told his story to a judge about an accident. Quote, well, me and my cow Becky was walking down the highway and we got hit by a car. Becky was all broken up